that heart of saying, I've been given something, I have what I need, and I want to say thanks is really beautiful. Welcome to the Essentially Translatable podcast brought to you by Lutheran Bible Translators. I'm Rich Radusky.
And I'm Emily Wilson.
And it is that time of year.
Woo! Time to eat.
Time to eat. Yes, it's November here. I was going to say getting cold, although this particular day it's nice and warm outside. But yeah, I was outside yesterday, of course, here in the Midwest. It gets dark ridiculously early now. But before it gets dark, there's that hardly any leaves on the tree, faded pink sky with the sun going down in the skyline. It reminds me of when I was a kid watching Charlie Brown Thanksgiving. That's how they draw the scenery there. And anyways, that's like our experience right now here in the Midwest. So that time of year when it's getting cold, but here in the United States, we have the Thanksgiving holiday. And so to celebrate that, because in America, for the Thanksgiving holiday has a lot to do with food. We wanted to talk a little bit about food and festivals. So tell the folks what we're in store for here.
Yeah. So our Christmas episode, we shared Christmas stories, Easter stories. And we're like, okay, Thanksgiving is a very American holiday. Yes, we do actually have a Canadian story in there because Canadians also celebrate Thanksgiving, just not in November.
Correct, yeah.
But, we gotta give a little salute, a little nod to our northern friendly neighbors.
Yeah. And the global audience, many countries have a Thanksgiving holiday just at different times of the year. So.
Exactly. So food and festivals, not always Thanksgiving, but just celebrating, hey, we're all getting together. And there is a lot of fellowship that happens over food.
Yeah.
It's almost like, is it fellowship if you don't have food? It's a question.
It's a question, yeah. I know that that's how I got where I am in life. Right now, there was a lot of food involved, so for better or worse. All right, well, who's up first here?
All right, so we want to share with you a story from Rhoda Hogue in her early days in Liberia, and she's got a really great story. So a little bit about food prep and expectations maybe not being met. So enjoy.
Well, hi, everybody. We were in Liberia back in the 80s, and I think this was in 1985. It was our second Thanksgiving in Liberia, and we were going to be in the city. We had a village home, but we were going to be in the capital city of Monrovia for Thanksgiving. And some other missionaries told us that they found a man who was selling turkeys. He raised them and he was selling them. And this was not a real common thing. We're mostly used to sort of guinea fowl running around or chickens that didn't always look so great either. So I didn't have high hopes for this, but a turkey, it's Thanksgiving. So we put in our order for one, and I didn't even think to say how big or anything because I just didn't think they'd be that big. Well, the day he showed up, I guess the day before Thanksgiving, with these turkeys, which were thankfully defeathered and ready for the oven, and I was a bit shocked at the size. These guys were like 25 to 30 pounds. They were huge, just huge. And I wasn't alone in that. We got to talking to each other, other ladies, and there was one lady who wisely had ordered, a smaller turkey, and the price was pretty high too. I can't remember what turkeys were going for like in the States at that time, but I know these were like a couple of dollars a pound, and so they got pretty pricey. And then the other problem was that they just didn't fit in our little stove. We had one of those with the 4 burners that are all next to each other, just like a small stove. So the oven was small, and I didn't have a pan that big either. So someone helped us cut the turkey in half. A lot of the other ladies did that as well. And so I cooked half a turkey at a time. And we just had a lot of turkey that year. And nobody wanted us to really share it with them either because they had a lot of turkey. And anyway, it made for a fun memory and just kind of enjoyable in its own way and fun. Thanks.
Okay. Yeah, that just reminds me, like, the almost universal story when you live overseas or cross-culturally is like you can't take anything for granted. So all the assumptions you might make about like what size it's going to be, how much it's going to cost, like if you don't think to ask because it just seems so automatic, then you're
assume
gonna
nothing.
Get what you're going to get. Yeah.
Yeah, I love how Rhoda like just paints this picture, and it's like I can imagine like like what are we gonna do with this? And like you, I know it probably wasn't that, but like I just imagine like someone getting out a saw.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out what a half a cooked turkey looks like. Are we talking like just down the center of the breast? It's like one wing and one drumstick, or is it like front to back?
Well, and then it's like no one wanted,
Right.
and he like that is like unheard of. It's always like, oh man, I want that turkey, but
Yeah.
everyone had access.
When the children of Israel had too much manna or something, or too much quail.
Yeah, there you go.
Anyways, that's great. I love that story.
Man.
Yeah, so good.
So the next story is from the Kaisers, and a little like two different kinds of scenarios. So Jim's story for us, really sharing about his experience in Sierra Leone, and Susan also backs it up with their experiences in Ethiopia. And in Sierra Leone, there wasn't really a time to celebrate Thanksgiving, so he shared about other holidays in Sierra Leone and how they were able to celebrate with their community. So take a listen.
When we lived in the village in Sierra Leone, and there the church would sometimes get together for Easter or Christmas and have a celebration out in the bush a bit, and they would collect money from everyone who wanted to come ahead of time, and then they would buy maybe a goat and a bunch of rice, and they would get together a bunch of big pots, and they would take those out to the location that morning and would start cooking these huge pots of food. And people would gather, and there'd be a big feast and sitting out there and enjoying time together and the food. On other occasions, we would have people come to our house, and we would serve them to a meal that we were having. And we soon found out that there are different customs about how you go about serving food to people. When we would have folks to our house, we started out by doing what we would do in America, and we would take a platter full of whatever food and pass it around for each person to help themselves as the plate went around the table. But we found out that didn't work well in Sierra Leone. In Sierra Leone, the custom was that if you gave somebody a plate full of something, that was meant to be his food, and he would keep that and expect that was what he was supposed to eat. So we very quickly learned that we had to adapt, and when you wanted to give someone food, that you needed to put it on the plate first and then give him his plate with what you wanted him to eat from on there.
In Ethiopia, there were a couple of families that we would often get together, and if we were going to celebrate something like Thanksgiving, we would decide ahead of time who was going to provide what. And then we get together on that day and enjoy the meal together. We might play games together, or we might just sit and talk, and kids would enjoy being together. And very quickly, these families would become like our family just because we get to know them and we celebrate those holidays together. We don't have our own family there, so that quickly becomes your own family. Another thing that happened occasionally, especially if we would be in the capital city, would be that the American embassy would invite Americans to come and celebrate the holiday together there. And usually the embassy itself would provide perhaps the meat, and then the rest of us would all bring something. So it was kind of like a potluck. And There would usually also be games that they planned, like if it was Easter, they might have an Easter egg hunt or that kind of thing, so that we would have a time of special American type fellowship.
So Jim's story about family style
Yes.
serving not being universal kind of reminds me of a time that here when we were having a mission exploration event where people were introduced to different dining styles.
Yeah.
And, it was just kind of, hey, it's not universal, it's not good or bad or like it's just different. But that awkwardness that can happen as you're like, oh, wait, no, you passed it.
I'm just imagining these folks that the Kaisers had over as well.
Mm-hmm.
Like they go back home and it's like, it was the weirdest thing, man. All I got to eat was potatoes. Like and they
Why
gave
did
all
he
the
get the
potatoes to
meat?
me and this guy got the meat.
Yeah.
That
it's
made
a
for
little
good
unfortunate.
conversations for others as well. But
Yeah, and then how Susan really captured like when you're away from your family,
Yeah.
like that time together of, being able to play games and have food and celebrating a holiday that is not necessarily celebrated in the country where you are residing. It's really impactful to be able to gather together and it's like, well, what do we have in common? We're maybe different professions, coming from different parts of the U.S., different backgrounds, but hey, we're going to be family for the day.
Yeah.
So
it's really true. It's really great. Coming up next is Chris and Janine Pluger. And if you've listened to the podcast before, now this was what you were waiting for, the great storytellers, Chris and Janine, with their stories of food and festivals.
Yeah, in Zambia and the different flavors and some unwanted guests appear in Janine's story. So take a listen.
So despite being missionaries now, when I grew up, before I met and married Chris, I had been born and raised in the same house my entire life. So our very first year on the field, holiday traditions were a big thing. I had never been away from home around the holidays. And so it was a hard thing. But what I remember distinctly was having a Thanksgiving dinner with the Wells missionaries in Zambia. And I walked into the missionary guest house there, and Sharon Hartman had decorated for Thanksgiving. And it was just almost like walking into home. She had done such a nice job. And it was a relief to see, even though I'm so far away from home and away from my family, I could see that, you can still keep and carry your traditions with you. And you can just celebrate them with other people, with new people. And that was such a blessing to me, being away from home for the first time like that over a holiday season. Another story, which was another time with the missionaries, instead of celebrating inside, we had a nice alfresco Thanksgiving dinner, which you can do in the middle of Zambia in November. Except the thing about Zambia is that November is the beginning of the rainy season. And with the rainy season, you also get the inswa, which are flying termites. And it just so happened that the night of our Thanksgiving dinner was Inswa night. And so we had started dinner and we were eating and it was wonderful. And as it was getting dark, the lights came on, outside, the security lights, and up came the Inswa. And we're talking swarms and swarms of tiny termites flying all over the place. And they covered all of our food and they covered all the lights. And that was another memorable but much less enjoyable Thanksgiving for me.
The one Thanksgiving that I definitely remember, we were out in Petaoke, so it must not have been the first Thanksgiving. It must have been the second. So Sean would have been about 10 years old. And I'm not sure how well formed Sean's sense of traditions were. I'm not sure what really meant a lot to Sean, especially around the Thanksgiving holiday, because we always look forward to Christmas, but Thanksgiving was just kind of a thing. And so we had discussed that we're not going to have a turkey for Thanksgiving because turkeys cost like $65 and they're really small, and who knows how many times they've been frozen and thawed. But Sean's special request, so we had the chicken for lunch, but Sean's special request was for Thanksgiving dinner, for the supper of Thanksgiving, was to do what they did on the Charlie Brown Thanksgiving show, which was to have the Charlie Brown Snoopy, Thanksgiving quote unquote dinner, which is let me get this right, jelly beans, pretzel sticks, popcorn, and toast. And so Sean helped us make that. And it was, 85, 90, 95 degrees. We were sweating, we were wet, but we were eating our toast and our jelly beans and just enjoying a nice Charlie Brown Thanksgiving. And then, of course, we watched the show. So that was fun, too. But yeah, that was Thanksgiving on the field in Zambia.
They're so dynamic.
Yeah. Yeah, my brother and his family do that Charlie Brown Thanksgiving meal to the boys since they were little.
Nice.
That's what they loved. So anyways, but yeah.
We've never done that. No, I love to, Janine just like hits the nail on the head. Like the traditions, like walking into a space and just feeling like, oh, this is what I think of when I think of this holiday. You know, we always listen to the same like pianist every Thanksgiving autumn season, and warm candles and just having just this warm atmosphere. Now, I mean, it was warm for her for a different reason because Southern Hemisphere, but there's a lot to be said with that.
Yeah, and I would say that one of the things that happens when you're overseas is you didn't realize that's what you were missing until you walk into it, and then it's like you said, it's like, oh, this is really what I needed, what I missed, or what feels like this holiday to me. So that's really special. Yeah.
But the inswa, I did follow up with her, and no, she did not ever consume any.
Right. Yeah. There's got to be limits somewhere, I guess.
Yeah,
but,
right.
Yeah. So speaking of Thanksgiving holidays, does your family watch football on Thanksgiving at all? You guys don't strike me as sports people, really. So that the Detroit Lions play every year on Thanksgiving. That's like a Michigan tradition then that you're going to watch the Lions, or a lot of people even go to the game, even though they're terrible at football, and it's a disappointment every single year. But this year they play the Chicago Bears, so maybe we'll play something or something. I don't know, but yeah. So I remember our first Thanksgiving then in Botswana. We didn't get to watch the Detroit Lions game, and to be honest, we both thought that was a tradition that was worth giving up at that point. And nothing's really changed so far this year. The Detroit Lions, as we're recording this podcast, they are winless on the season. This is the first football season where there's 17 games instead of 16 games in the regular season, but they're not going to be 0-17 because they didn't win on Sunday, but they tied. So it's a very Lions way to also not do something new. So anyways, let's talk about our well-behaved neighbors to the north in Canada. They have a Thanksgiving tradition too. And we're going to hear from Mike and Kara Kuhn, who are Lutheran Bible translators, Canada, missionaries serving in Cameroon. Canadian Thanksgiving is celebrated in a similar manner to U.S. Thanksgiving, but it is the second weekend of October on a Monday, which doesn't make sense. So that was Emily's note. Anyways, it follows the second weekend of October, celebrated on Monday.
Yes, that is exactly how the internet describes
it. That's the internet. Okay.
The World Wide Web.
According to crowdsourced information. If there are any Canadians listening and you have more better information than the internet, send that on to us. So, the Coons and the Derricks, we're going to hear from them too, both in Cameroon. Cameroon is like right in they call it the armpit of Africa sometimes. So if you're listening from Cameroon, we don't mean that in a negative way, but if geographically that's just what it looks like.
It looks like a rooster.
This location is in
the west central part of Africa.
Correct. And it has lots of different climates there. I don't know if at Thanksgiving time it's any different than any other time, which is basically hot. Yes.
Very toasty.
Where these guys are anyways, that you can go to some places that are in mountains that are nice and cool, but we're really digressing here. So what do we know about, what do we hear from Mike and Kara and the Derricks here?
Oh, well, we get to hear a little bit about the menu and what that all entails for them as they were improvising, but also how Cameroonians celebrate in Thanksgiving in their church and in their communities.
Hi, Rich. Hi, Emily. So you want to know a little bit about Thanksgiving as Canadians in Cameroon. When we first arrived, we were in a small village in the northern part of Cameroon, a village called Galim. and we were really the only missionaries in the village, so there was no opportunity to gather with other people, so our family would just try and do a special meal on our own. When I think back on Thanksgiving in Canada, usually the three things I think about are family, lots of good food, and giving thanks to God in prayer. So we always tried to incorporate those things into our Thanksgiving celebrations in Galim. Kara, can you work us through the menu a little bit?
So if we were in Canada, we'd usually be having turkey, but we didn't have access to turkey in Galim. Sometimes we could get a duck, sometimes we could get a chicken, but sometimes they were hard to find. So if you were lucky and you started looking a few weeks in advance, you might find somebody who has a fowl for sale and you can get it and keep it at your place. And when it's getting close to Thanksgiving, have a neighbor friend come over and help you slaughter it and then cook it up. So we often did duck or chicken.
So for us, the Derrick's family living in Cameroon, when Thanksgiving comes around and we're missing home and we're missing the holiday time, one wonderful tradition that we have in Cameroon is called the Fête de Reconnaissance, the Day of Thanksgiving, they call it. And so there's a special church service. It's a very, very long service, maybe 3 or 4 hours, but everyone dresses up their best. Everyone just is in really great spirits and really feeling positive after their harvest. And when they give their offering, it's probably their biggest offering of the year. And to show their joy, to give that gift, usually the members of the congregation, along with ourselves, place our gift, maybe like some kind of vegetables or some kind of, even I've seen chickens and goats and things put on top of your head. And you dance down the aisle of the church as you offer your offering, offer your tithe in front of the altar. And so that's something we've always looked forward to. And even after that church service, we have friends over to just talk about things we're thankful for. And that tradition we've had in Cameroon really helps us feel closer to home.
Yeah, actually, listening to Elliot's story just reminds me, of course, that the timing of Thanksgiving, and for many cultures throughout world history and still in the world today, is really tied to the harvest and the dependence, really, that you have on God's graciousness through that harvest work.
Yeah, that's actually what I was thinking between Mike and Karakoon and Elliot Derrick's sharing about his experience with Serena and the kids. Just that it really, what was the origin before Thanksgiving? It wasn't football. It wasn't even turkey, but Thanksgiving for what we have been given in our family and in the provision that we have for food and gathering together in fellowship, thanking God. And that's just, it is beautifully imagined in my mind of seeing people from different backgrounds, different cultures, and how we can celebrate in Thanksgiving around the world.
Yeah, and this demonstration of the thankfulness, the parading, the gift.
Yeah.
You know, sometimes maybe we think in our culture like not to be too showy or ostentatious or whatever, but in this case, it's not about that. It's not about showing off the gift. It's about showing how thankful we are to give.
The display of gratitude that we are so thankful to have, this chicken, this squash, being able to say, Lord, everything that I have is from you, and being able to give that back.
Right. It's in the book of Deuteronomy. That's where it's read in Lutheran churches on Thanksgiving celebration services. Usually the Old Testament reading is a reading from Deuteronomy, where God says, when you have entered into this land where you're going to have all this abundance, all these riches, this is the thing that really just resonates with me, all these abundance, all this riches and things that you're going to have available, remember to give thanks to God, or you're going to think that you did it yourself. And so these demonstrations of thankfulness that we see from places that maybe don't even have access to nearly the amount of abundance, but that heart of saying, I've been given something, I have what I need, and I want to say thanks is really beautiful.
So our next story is definitely about fellowship. Carl and Kelsey Grolke and Tiffany Smith actually got to celebrate with them in Botswana a couple of years ago when she was still an intern with us. And just coming together and just celebrating with the people in our community and just kind of a fun flavor for them. So take a listen.
Hi, Emily and Rich and podcast fans. This is Kelsey.
And Carl Grolke.
We live in Maun, Botswana, and we usually try to get the Americans in town together for Thanksgiving every year.
We end up with a pretty good number of people between other missionaries that we know and some Peace Corps volunteers and just other people that have been around.
Yeah, we have a great time trying to make as close to possible as we can of an American Thanksgiving dinner.
There's one deli in town that stocks turkeys around that time of year. And so we can get an actual turkey. The biggest one that we found last year was, I think, around 9 pounds. So a little bit different.
Our sweet potatoes here are white. And so one of the ladies dyed the sweet potatoes orange so they would look like the ones from home.
And we usually spend the year pretty much hunting for cranberries, for a cranberry relish. We have found them frozen every once in a while. So every time we go to the shops, I always check the frozen fruit to see if the cranberries are there. I think we've had some frozen in our freezer since March.
Waiting for Thanksgiving.
Waiting for this year.
Last year we put Cheetos on top of our green bean casserole since we didn't have the little onion bits you're supposed to put on top. But either way, whatever we can get, we have a great time celebrating a holiday that feels like home. Even if it's 95 degrees outside, we pack it in and have a great day being thankful together.
My first holiday spent overseas just happened to be Thanksgiving when I was an intern for LBT in Botswana in 2019. I remember it being the warmest Thanksgiving I've ever experienced coming from Iowa, and the selection of food was slightly different just because not all of the quote normal food that I would associate with Thanksgiving was available in the grocery stores in Maun. So, for example, I made green bean casserole entirely from scratch, which was a first for me because cream of mushroom soup was just non-existent in your average supermarket. But what I loved about the whole experience was that it brought together many Americans from around the city together for a comfortable and familiar meal that we all are so just used to celebrating. And so it was nice to celebrate it with people from all over the US and from all walks of life, but we all had that one thing in common, that we were missionaries in Botswana and we could just come together for this one familiar, comfortable tradition. And now that I'm overseas again this year, but this time in England for Thanksgiving, I'm really looking forward to sharing that experience with other people. Even though I'm the only American in my program, there are still several classmates who want to enjoy some, quote, traditional American food. So I'm really looking forward to sharing that with them. And I think that it will still be a really fun experience. And yeah, I guess that's my experience of Thanksgiving overseas. And I just look forward to experiencing more in the future and seeing how creative I can get with ingredients that may or may not be available, and how many more people, expats, missionaries, whoever it might be, who I can hear their stories of Thanksgiving and experience that tradition with them.
Carl and Kelsey Grolke are formidable in the kitchen. We just start with that. I would spent close to 2 months recently doing my doctoral research there in Botswana, and Carl and Kelsey, when I came out of the bush in the field, they would host me, and yeah, they just do amazing things there. So it's no surprise that they're the ones pulling together folks for
Cheetos
Thanksgiving.
On green bean casserole.
Yeah, that is the one thing though. If Carl and Kelsey are listening, I found those kind of onions when I lived in Botswana. So just don't give up yet. You can find those French fried onions. So, anyways.
Yeah. Well, I mean, being innovative, I think, is crucial.
Yeah.
Flexible, innovative, and I think that's the balance, right? Of, okay, selecting what traditions like kind of ground us, and in what ways can you bend that tradition to, like, I mean, I'm going to hunt for cranberries in March, like, because I know that that's something that I love to have with a turkey or, you know, whatever the Thanksgiving meal is. And just trusting, like, okay, well, if it doesn't work out, I'm still going to have a wonderful time because I'm thankful for, you know, my family and those around me. And I think that's what Tiffany kind of shared, like, you know, that flexibility in coming together and just encouraging one another.
Yeah.
And I love too that it's like then sharing it with other people who don't celebrate in that same way. It's good fun.
Yeah, when you get to be in that cross-cultural situation and then say, let me show you a little bit about where I come from and share that with others too, that is really great.
Yeah.
And the, like you said, the flexibility, like on the one hand, it's about being thankful, but on the other hand, you know, the experience is part of it too, and what makes it dear to us. And I think you can find that there's the opportunity to incorporate some what become new traditions, maybe just in that situation where you're at, or maybe they even come home with you and you share them with others back home too.
Yeah, it's like, oh, this is the way I always did it, but maybe this way is better.
Right, exactly. Yeah. When our family, since we're on the Botswana, I'll just throw one in real quick too. When we lived in Botswana, we lived in a village kind of remote, so not really an opportunity to gather with others. But one thing that I love that just really illustrates how the people there kind of tried to care for us is one of the owners of a local shop that sold meat got turkeys in. And so he made a point of showing me, look, I have these turkeys. And so I bought one, and then, you know, nobody else was buying these things. And there weren't a lot, but yeah, long story short, I bought them all eventually. But they had gotten them in for us because we live there in the community, and they heard from somewhere that Americans have this holiday and they eat these strange things. And yeah, we made one of them, and I actually had the neighbors over, and more before you could like Google search on your phone, I had to go inside on my laptop, and then I printed out this picture that had a chicken and a turkey next to each other to show like, okay, this is the difference between these things. Yeah. So, because they were like, is this just a really big chicken or what?
Right.
Anyways.
Yeah. Turduckins, right.
Good stuff. But yeah, just to really, again, just to celebrate and be thankful, but then also to really just kind of take in the love that was shown for our family that way.
Yeah, no, it's quite lovely because, you know, as you're just kind of acclimating and, you know, and loving people and being in a different environment, and it's like, hey, you're part of the community, and we recognize where you come from is different, and you have that background to celebrate too. So, yeah. So Thanksgiving is, as we've discovered, not uniform around the world, and there's some flexibility, but sometimes just new traditions entirely need to be created just for our wholeness, our wellness, and for us to be able to truly give thanks, and the importance of finding rest and Sabbath. And so one of our chief advocates for actually investing that time in, you know, seeking holistic health, member care coordinator Ali Federwitz shares their story of how they celebrate Thanksgiving on an annual basis.
Our family tradition for Thanksgiving came out of a need for us to just have quality time, just the five of us, without really being involved in any sort of activity with others or even really making a big hoopla out of it. It's just needed us to be able to disconnect from technology and from the noise and busyness of the city. So with recommendations from friends, we learned about a private beach about an hour and a half drive from where we live, and decided, okay, we've heard a lot about this place. Why don't we just check it out? And why don't we go on Thanksgiving Day? It's a Thursday. Nobody else here has that day off. And even, you know, if it were to be, you know, a Friday, these places would be busier than on a Thursday for any normal time. So we just took advantage of it being on an odd day and went to this beach we had heard so much about, and were so pleasantly surprised when we showed up there and there was nobody else there. It felt like we owned this beachfront, this part of the ocean, just the five of us. And the beach resort might be a generous word for it. It's very basic accommodations, but there was, a pavilion with table and chairs just overlooking the sand and the ocean. So our kids would play on the sand, building, digging, whatever. And Paul and I would take advantage of, them being entertained, and we would drink some really nice coffee and just kind of relax for a little bit. And then after some ocean play, we would enjoy lunch there on the beach too. We had the restaurant prepare for us, and the guy who runs it has a diverse background, has been a lot of different places, and he just kind of recognized, this is a family here on a Thursday. Hey, are you Americans? Are you celebrating Thanksgiving? And, it took a couple of, I think, our second or third year where he put all of those things together that he had seen us. But we just kind of tell him what we like to eat and just ask him to put together a big platter, family style, with, kebabs and vegetables and potatoes and whatever he might have. And we share family style. And one thing the kids especially love is that dessert is included with our meal. And it could be anything from fresh fruit to a scoop of ice cream, or maybe they've made some sort of cake that we can partake. And so it just really feels like a feast for us. In all actuality, the price is far below what you would pay to have a night at a hotel, or even actually a meal at a fancy restaurant. We, just kind of go for the day. And by the time we return to our home in the late afternoon, early evening, and get showers and just kind of get in comfy clothes, we're all feeling tired, but that good kind of tired, like the kind of tired you feel after you've eaten turkey for the day. And we might watch a movie, we might play some games, but it's just really low key. And I haven't had to cook for the day, so that's relaxing for me. And Paul hasn't been on his computer or on his phone or anything, and that's relaxing for him. And the kids have gotten our full attention, so that's relaxing for them. And then we'll just eat, whether we can scrounge for leftovers in the fridge or we make a smoothie and some popcorn. It just feels so different from our regular busyness that we just feel joyful. And then not only do we look forward to that day, but that weekend then is our traditional time to start decorating our house for Christmas. So the whole holiday really holds just a lot of tradition and memories for our crew each year. And we really kind of protect it. There was once the suggestion that maybe we invite some friends along, and our kids were vehemently opposed to that. No, this is our time. We can play with our friends another time. This is our time. So it really has become something just really fulfilling and relaxing for all of us.
I want to celebrate Thanksgiving that way.
It sounds pretty nice. Yeah.
Just being able to actually rest. And I love Thanksgiving. I love Christmas. I think I just overdo the busyness. Mm-hmm. You try to pack so much in, and there's a lot to be said to just sit, like slowing it down, spending time with the key people in your life, like maybe that's not the day of that you can do that, but being able to slow down and actually these are the blessings in my life, and to celebrate those and to just breathe.
Yeah, there's certainly a lot of value in the mindfulness that comes with what she described there. Mm-hmm. And, that focused on being thankful. Spending time with your family certainly will remind you of some of the greatest gifts that God has given you and what you're thankful for. Mm-hmm. And yeah, it's just a beautiful story. And again, on a beach, we don't, since in the Northern Hemisphere, I suppose in the southern part of the United States, which I haven't been blessed to be in Thanksgiving, maybe that's an option, but not for the rest of us, right?
No.
Yeah, great stories and great work putting this together. So what will Thanksgiving look like for Emily Wilson?
Oh, Emily Wilson will be spending time with her nephew and niece, as I like to call them, my halflings.
Yes, indeed.
Solomon and Hazel. And eating probably too much turkey. My sister has this amazing cranberry and pear sauce that is warm, and it has cinnamon in it, So, and just spending time with family, avoiding shopping at all costs, because that's just too much madness here.
All right. Yeah. Yep. And my wife likes to cook from scratch and try new things. So she's got a nice array of things planned, and I'll pitch in with some cooking as well. Our family is getting more spread out, and we'll have a smaller group this year, but enjoy the time. And again, just a great privilege to have the time to be thankful, to share fellowship with those who are close to us, and to hear how God's at work around the world, and different expressions of thankfulness, food and festivals and fellowship. So it's a real privilege to share those stories with you. We hope that as you celebrate your Thanksgiving, that the Lord allows for you to have the space also to reflect on all the great gifts He's given you, and just really, find that joy in our hearts of being thankful for what God's done in our lives.
And shameless plug here, as you're cooking and baking,
right,
and driving around from place to place,
you're going to have some time on your hands.
Yeah.
Which can be filled with
more essentially translatable.
More essentially translatable. Where are we going to find that at?
lbt.org/podcast, or any of your favorite podcast platforms.
Yep. And if you're listening to us on a podcast platform, then
you're already there.
In the right place. You might think about subscribing so you can get that later on.
It's true. Tell your friends.
Absolutely.
And happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving. I'm so glad that you spent some of it with us. Thank you for listening to the Essentially Translatable podcast, brought to you by Lutheran Bible Translators. You can find past episodes of the podcast at lbt.org/podcast, or subscribe on Audible, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Follow Lutheran Bible Translators' social media channels on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter, or go to lbt.org to find out how you can get involved in the Bible translation movement and put God's Word in their hands. This episode of Essentially Translatable was produced and edited by Andrew Olson. Our executive producer is Emily Wilson. Podcast artwork was designed by Caleb Rodewald. Music written and performed by Rob Veit. I'm Rich Radowski. So long for now.